In this video, I'm going to find the arc cosine of negative radical 3 over 2. If you remember what arc cosine is, it's the angle whose cosine is negative rad 3 over 2. Meaning I know that the ratio of sides adjacent over hypotenuse, because that's what cosine is, it's adjacent over hypotenuse. I know that I'm looking for a reference triangle for which the adjacent over hypotenuse comes out to be this ratio, and what I need to know is what the angle is. Well, it turns out there's infinitely many angles for which the cosine has this as its output. But we want to limit it to just one answer. For example, if I was to type this in my calculator, it's not going to give me infinitely many answers, it's going to give me one. And it turns out, if you remember right, the arc cosine always outputs angles in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So this helps me. I know that I'm looking for a reference triangle either in quadrant 1 or 2. The fact that the ratio of sides is negative helps me out here, because if you remember right, labeling a reference triangle in the first quadrant is not going to work in this scenario, because there's no way that I'm going to get the adjacent and the hypotenuse, that ratio, to come out to be negative when your x value and your y value here are positive in the first quadrant. So the only way this is going to work is if I write down an x and y axis and draw a reference triangle in the second quadrant. I only had choices between quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Quadrant 1 doesn't work, so I'm going to move to quadrant 2. So I drew this reference triangle in quadrant 2. And I had to label it so that the adjacent over the hypotenuse came out to be this ratio. So here's my reference angle, theta prime. And I just labeled the side adjacent, negative radical 3. And I labeled the hypotenuse 2. So this is the angle whose cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. I just need to find its angle. By memorization, I remember these sides as a special triangle from the beginning of the course, that if you had a triangle with sides 1, 2, and negative radical 3, the side opposite the 1 you could think of as 30 degrees. Having trouble labeling that. The side opposite the negative radical 3 is 60 degrees. In this case, I don't need the 60 degrees though, I just need to know the reference angle. So if this reference angle is 30 degrees, you can denote this angle as 180 degrees would be all the way here, but I don't want to go that far. I only want to go from here and move counterclockwise this far. So if this angle in here is 30 degrees and all the way around here is 180, you can think of your angle is 180 degrees, and that would be too far, and you'd have to back off 30 degrees. If you subtract 30 from that, you'd get 150. So my answer is 150 degrees. Now, if I wanted that in radians, I'd have to convert degrees into radians. So what would that be? I need to get the number smaller, and this MemoPad does not work well on my home computer, but it's the computer I like to use. So if you took 150 degrees and converted it to radians by what? Dividing by 180, because the answer is going to be smaller in radians, so divide by 180 and multiply by pi, and then you could simplify that down, and that would be your answer in radians. So let's give this a shot. Let's see here. 3 goes into this 5 times, and 3 goes into 180. Well, 3 goes into 150 50 times, and 3 goes into 180 60 times, but I guess I really should be dividing both by 30. So 30 goes into 155 times, 30 goes into 180 6 times. So in radians, my answer would be 5 pi over 6. To verify this, I'm going to go to my graphing calculator, and let me just see what I'm going to get here by clicking mode. I'm in degree mode, so I'm expecting to get the answer of 150 degrees. So I'm going to hit second quit. I'm going to hit arc cosine, which is the inverse cosine, so second cosine, and type in my input here, negative square root of 3. Close that parenthesis off because I don't want the 2 under the radical. Divide by 2, and I'm expecting to get 150 degrees out of this. I can convert it to radians by dividing by 180, multiplying by pi, as I did a few seconds ago, or I could simply go to my mode, go down, put the calculator in radian mode, hit second quit, ask the same question again by pressing second and then pressing enter. Second enter is just a lazy way of copying the last command line that you did. And now when I press enter, even though I'm asking the same question, I'm asking for the answer in radians. So this must be the decimal equivalent to the angle 5 pi over 6. In fact, if I took 5 and multiplied by pi and divided by 6, you'd see that that is indeed the decimal equivalent to 5 pi over 6. So two ways I can respond. The angle whose cosine is negative rad 3 over 2 is 150 degrees, or if you want your answer in radians, that's 5 pi over 6.